Greetings, my saplings. Today we will be discussing the Jordan 1 High Smoke Gray in men and grade school. To be specific, like always in these how to cop guides, we will be mentioning some release info, how to cop them, and of course, like always, some resale predictions. Starting with the release info, though, these will be releasing on July 11th for $170 in men's sizes and $130 in grade school sizes. Luckily, stock is pretty good on these. They are your typical general release Jordan 1, however, that does not mean you should sleep on them. We'll discuss more towards the end of the video. For right now, though, let's discuss how to cop these. Let's talk about how you guys could get these Jordan 1 Smoke Grays for yourself, whether it's for resale intentions or for personal wear. To start off, the first thing I'm going to need you guys to do is open up your Foot Locker app, and the reason we're doing this is because we're going to be signing up for the Flex reservation. Now, unfortunately, not all locations are available at the moment, primarily due to COVID, of course. However, I do highly suggest checking regardless of where you are because you might just end up being surprised. Unfortunately, head starts don't work the way they used to work. Currently, you actually have to sort of buy your way into getting head starts. The more purchases you make, the more points you could get, and with those points you're able to then, I guess you could say, purchase head start. What is good about it, and this does level out the playing field somewhat, they only limit you to a certain amount of head starts that you're allowed to use on one single release. So someone who's purchased a ton of products can't just instantly win the sneaker, which I think is at least somewhat fair. And if I'm being honest, it's really not too difficult to get all the head starts as long as you go for all the hyped releases and you do go for leftovers, which we'll discuss a little bit later. But anyway, if you don't tend to go for a lot of hyped releases, or you're just starting out and you're really desperate for head starts, you know you're not going to win, and you really want this pair of sneakers, you could also purchase some gift cards and then sell those gift cards to friends, family members, or just to any buyers in general, and you will still get those flex points for the gift card. Now, the rest when it comes to signing up for these flex reservations is luckily self-explanatory, so you don't have to worry too much about that. It's a super simple process when it comes to this. Just make sure you get your whole family involved, whether it's your wife, whether it's your mother or father, your brother and sister. Try to get as many people in as you can because although there are head starts, there still is a randomized process to it. And of course, don't forget, you're going to want to sign up for the men's and grade school pairs, not just one or the other. You're allowed to sign up for both. Now, currently, and this is specifically due to COVID right now, they're giving you 2 days to pick up your shoes. So unlike usual, where you would get the leftovers at around 3 p.m. local time or 6 p.m. local time on weekdays, that's not exactly the case for these. In this case, you're actually going to be going for leftovers 2 days after the drop. So that would be on the 13th, unlike what we're normally used to. Now, what you'll have to do on your end is call your local foot stores to find out how they're going to be doing it, what their procedure is, because some of them tend to do raffles on the 11th, the morning of, where you do have to line up first come, first serve for those raffle tickets. Then you come back on the 13th, or on the other hand, some of them just do it straight up first come, first serve on the 13th. But anyway, let's move on from those onto the next opportunities you guys could go for. And just like the flex reservations, you guys could actually work on setting this up right now. At least likely by the time I'm uploading this, if not perhaps a few days later, I will post a full raffle list for these on my Twitter, KeithAdam10. You can feel free to give me a follow there. In addition to the raffle list, there's also other countless information I do put out to you guys that tends to be urgent. But now, more importantly than the raffles, let's discuss the online first come first serve releases, because that's where all the fun's at, isn't it? And all the lovely errors. So specifically, when it comes to these first come first serve sites, I'm not going to be mentioning every single site. Instead, I'm specifically going to be mentioning the ones that you should prioritize. And I'm actually going to be breaking this down into how to manage your time, because that's very important as a manual user. You can't obviously just be a million places at once. You will have to focus in specific areas. So for that reason, I'm going to be breaking it down like this for you guys, and let me know if you guys do find this useful. So first of all, at 8 a.m. Eastern time, don't really have a good chance to cop here. The only reason I'm mentioning this is because there's nothing else to do at 8 a.m. Eastern time. But anyway, Undefeated will be dropping. Again, they are Shopify. You're not really going to have a good chance of copying from them manually. Even if you do have access to a monitor, you do have add to cart links, it's still going to be very difficult, but it's not impossible. So while you're up at 8 a.m. Eastern time, might as well give it a shot. My tips for this would, of course, being signed into your Undefeated account beforehand, making sure your info is already added, you have autofill set up, and then if you don't have access to a monitor, then just simply search for Undefeated AJ1 High. and then when it comes to all other sites, you'll be searching for Jordan 1 high. Then the same exact thing essentially goes for social status and potentially ama maniere. They will confirm it on their Instagrams if they are going to be dropping via first come first serve on their websites. It does usually tend to be at 9 a.m. Eastern time, occasionally 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. Besides the point, you're not really going to have a great chance at all copying from here, even less so than Undefeated, but at 9 a.m. Eastern time, there's nothing else really to do. Maybe APB store might drop, but that's about it. Again, all those are Shopify sites. You're not going to have a good chance of copying from them, but might as well give it a shot. So moving on to 10 a.m. Eastern time now. This is where the fun begins. So for 10 a.m. Eastern time, let's start off with the chaos preparation. Finish Line, JD Sports, Snipes, and YMC will all be queues. So for this reason, I would suggest leaving tabs open for all of these sites. And if you don't happen to have the direct links, which you could usually find on SolLink's site or SolLink's Twitter, even J23. But anyway, those will all be queues. You're not going to want to be focusing on them at 10 a.m. Eastern time. However, you do want to prepare and have those open beforehand so you don't have to concern about it at 9:58. Similarly to those queues, sometimes you don't even get a queue. Foot sites are not about speed. They're about persistency and not giving up and surviving through all those errors without destroying your computer. So I wouldn't exactly suggest focusing on foot sites at exactly 10 a.m. Eastern time. Instead, I would suggest waiting until the next batch of sites that I'm about to mention, and after that, then you can head over to foot sites, keep on spamming the add to cart button, trying to add to cart on all the sites. The sites for foot sites do include Foot Locker, Foot Action, Champs, East Bay, and Kids Foot Locker. You should be trying all of them, and when you do get put into queue, because that does very often happen, simply wait in queue. I wouldn't really suggest using the multiple people jig that much when it comes to this, just because they do tend to ban pretty heavily. Same for Finish Line and JD Sports and all those ones. You can still use it, but I would suggest stopping at around 3 per IP address. Otherwise, you are really risking getting IP banned. But anyway, now the most important part. What are you going to be focusing on exactly 10 a.m. Eastern time as soon as the clock hits 10? Well, my personal suggestion would be to try to get in as many accounts as possible into Nike sneakers. The reason being, Nike sneakers has been doing a pretty good job at filtering out bots, especially on these very hype drops like Jordan 1s. The majority of success coming from bots is really only through browser mode at the moment when it comes to these very hyped drops, which means there's not going to be a lot of bots mass ordering unlike how it used to be. Not only that, but sneakers simply has the most stock by a significant amount. So you do have a really great shot here. You don't want to ignore it just because it's obvious. Don't try to be contrarian. You do have a really good chance at copying from sneakers. That's undeniable. It's going to be a Leo drop, so you'll have around 2 to 3 minutes to get in all your accounts. And for those of you who do still need more verified accounts to have a better chance of copying, feel free to purchase from my site that is linked in the description below. But anyway, aside from sneakers, if you do also want to try out some other sites, the best one I would suggest for manual users, which still ends up being pretty bad occasionally just because bots have been adjusting pretty well to the Parameter X protection on there, and that is Hibbits. Hibbits sometimes is pretty good if they do make a last minute update and bot devs don't keep up with it. I think that's pretty unlikely for this one, but it's still suggested that you at least try on your mobile device, and I do suggest your mobile device just because you could use Apple Pay from there. I wouldn't even bother trying if you're not going to be using Apple Pay. Now, in addition to their Hibbits and sneakers, at exactly 10 a.m. Eastern time, if you for whatever reason, do want to focus on Shopify sites, I don't know, maybe you just want to have a friend help you out and go for there as well. The top 4 Shopify sites I would suggest for manual users would be DTLR and Jimmy Jazz. They do get botted pretty heavily, but they do have a lot of stock. Then Concepts, although they do have pretty good stock, not quite as high as the other two, but they don't get botted as hard. Fortunately, it still is pretty hard because a lot of bots now have figured out their Cloudflare protection, and they have started putting more effort into it, so it's still not going to be an easy cop by any means at all. And if you do happen to have an early link, I would suggest giving Kith a try, because Kith is usually a pretty decent shot if you are able to refresh that early link. You don't have to wait for monitors, but if you don't, I would suggest focusing on the other places. And in reality, I really wouldn't put your time focus on any Shopify sites in general at 10 a.m. Eastern Time if you don't have access to monitors. Now, after those drops at exactly 10 a.m. Eastern Time, it's going to be 10:05, 10:04 a.m. Eastern Time, around that vicinity. You're going to want to continue spamming on foot sites, and while you're spamming on those foot sites, trying to add to cart constantly, you will also want to periodically be checking your tabs for Finish Line, JD Sports, Snipes, and YMC. And if you so happen to get through on any one of those, then you could go ahead and purchase from there as well. Now, after all of those do go out of stock, which usually tends to be within less than an hour or so, all those Q drops, usually within 30 to 50 minutes, I'd say, when it comes to really hype Jordan 1 drops, then I would suggest heading over to Shoe Palace and trying your best to cart on Shoe Palace, because they tend to stay in stock for hours at a time, especially some of the larger sizes. So it's going to take a lot of persistency, it's going to be a lot of frustration involved, but if you do happen to have some free time in the day, feel free to keep trying Shoe Palace. But anyway, that's essentially it when it comes to the United States. When it comes to Europe, your priorities, of course, are going to be Foot Locker Europe, without a doubt. Even though it is a queue and it tends to be really terrible for releases at 9 a.m., you still are going to want to make sure you use the multiple people jig for Foot Locker. I would suggest around like 5 to 6 at max before you do risk getting IP banned from there. And then, of course, I would suggest going for sneakers. Sneakers is going to be your number one opportunity. Unfortunately, all the other Europe sites do get botted extremely hard. It's absolutely terrible. Soulbox used to be a good place to try manually if you had access to a monitor, but unfortunately, they switched to Demandware not too long ago, just a few months ago, and now they're nowhere nearly as possible to cop manually off of. And then again, Mesh used to be a good place to try as well, but unfortunately, Mesh now shifted to mostly doing raffles, just like the majority of Europe retailers, which really sucks. The good news is, though, Mesh does occasionally like to restock on Tuesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 a.m. CEST. Now, with How to Cop out of the way, let's move on to some resale predictions, whether or not these are worth copying for resale purposes, of course. The way I see it, these will be profitable. Demand is extremely high on these. The supply, although it is high, the demand is compensating for that, just like it has on a lot of these basic color blocking Jordan 1s that we've been seeing. Although pre-sale is nothing incredible, I still would expect prices to hold. You may even see that usual 10% increase post-US drop sellout. So I would suggest going for all sizes when it comes to these, matter of fact, not just under 10. Although under 10 will have the best margin by far. Sizes above 10, you still should be able to make a little bit of lunch money on. A good comparison might be the Court Purples. They should be performing somewhat around there. I wouldn't expect these to do as good as the Royals did, but I still would expect those larger sizes to still be profitable, and I still would suggest going for them, especially without tax. If you don't have tax and you're skeptical by any reason, I would still highly suggest copying. And if you're still skeptical, just look at the Pine Greens, a shoe that was a complete brick. They sat for a decent amount of time. Just after about a month or so, they ended up being lunch money in all sizes. So I really, I'm just trying to instill some confidence into you guys. I really would expect these to do well. Not too much risk involved, really. And when it comes to the grade school pairs, even better when it comes to Jordan 1. So I would expect grade school pairs to have an even better margin than the men's pairs. So go for all sizes when it comes to those. But similar to the men's, the smaller the better, of course. But anyway, that's going to conclude it for today. Feel free to leave a like if you did enjoy or you perhaps learn a thing or two. Also, subscribe and enable post notifications to stay 100% updated on all hyped releases that are going to be coming about within this year. With that, good luck on the release, of course. I'll see you guys later and have a fantastic rest of your day.